Okay, so let's talk about China and greenhouse gases. Don't need to take a whole lot of intro time here. Let's dive right into the question, how big a problem are they? The short answer is they're a big problem and they're getting worse with each passing year. There will be no solution to greenhouse gas emissions unless China gets on board. A lot of this is driven by growth, but as you're going to see, my favorite measure, carbon intensity, also points to efficiency as frankly the number one problem. As a quick reminder, carbon intensity is basically emissions divided by gross domestic product. It tells you how much in terms of greenhouse gases are being created for the wealth being generated. As you can see, China is way up there in this measure and has been for a while. And this is a really big problem. China's growth, of course, has driven many emissions. But if their intensity rate had been something closer to the US's, even the US's 30, 40, 50 years ago, the emissions problem they are generating would be half of what it is today. So breaking down by sector where the emissions are coming from, the problem jumps right at you. It's electricity generation, the whole power question, and the reason for that is that a huge portion of China's energy comes from coal. And unfortunately, that is a big carbon emitter. If and when that is changed, China has a chance to greatly drive down their carbon intensity. The problem is their forecast is so far in the future that temperatures are going to be locked in by the time they start taking action. China has some good things going for it in the area of transportation. So you got to give credit where credit's due. Their train network, they're big into EVs. They're frankly threatening some of the other EV companies in the world. All speak to some hope that if the electricity generation could be driven down, you'd also then see the transportation not go ahead and rise too fast. So that's the good news. China is a coin with two sides. You have the cities, which look very modern, and then you have the rest of the country, which is still struggling to catch up. There's also been, as you probably have heard in the news, a lot of issues with overbuilding in housing. Not going to throw a ton of rocks there because it's not like China is the only country in the world to have a housing bubble. The issue is they've created an even bigger bubble than's been done in other places, and that's always been a big problem to resolve. China is an amazing country. I saw both these sides when I visited them some years ago. Hopefully, and I sincerely mean this, for their own benefit, their leadership will look and make, in their case, climate a top priority. We all need that to happen. So, as part of any country review, I try to place them on the climate scorecard. In this case, China, as you're going to probably guess, is not going to place particularly high. But let's get into the factors and you can see how it all works out. So, first in the scorecard is the question of cumulative impact. And China's recent very large emissions have caused it to move up to number two, and they're well on the way to becoming number one. Consequently, they score a 2 here. Next up is carbon intensity. This is worth spending a few seconds on. So, this is where China has truly been failing. In the case of their growth, they are much more along the lines of the intensity you get out of a South Africa. Then their own neighbor there, Taiwan, has also seen rapid economic growth, but they've done it in terms of greenhouse emissions twice as well. There's a lot of reasons for this. There's an Wendover Productions video on all the intricacies of how the Chinese energy system works. I can't dive into them all here. There are people who do a better job. But at the end of the day, they're going to get a 2 out of 10 because carbon intensity is nowhere near where it needs to be or could be. Next category is how do their 2030 goals look compared to others and what is needed to drive down greenhouse gases. And here their goal is to stop increasing, given that their emissions are already very inefficient and very high. They can't help but get a zero here. Somehow or another, this needs to change, not in 2030, but say 2025. The only hope I can give in this particular area for those listening is recent trends in their GDP growth. If that is coupled with moving towards more of the solar and wind that they have in the west of the country, might, just might, cause emissions to level off sooner. But it's not just leveling off. The goal needs to become more efficient and do that rapidly. Next up, 2060 goals. There, like most countries, China has set a goal of will be at net zero. So, in evaluating 2060 goals, I take a look not just at the stated goal, which is almost always zero, but is there a plausible path to be getting somewhere close to that? Because net zero itself is probably never achievable. And in the case of China, they're going to score surprisingly well here. They are a leader in EV worldwide, and that they are pushing it big in their own country. They've got good train infrastructure. They've invested in solar. They're a leader in solar. And they've also been expanding their nuclear, which is going to complement the solar and wind very well. If they can do all of those things and wean themselves off of the coal, there is some hope, and it's why they get a good score in 2060. It's a little late, but it's still a good score for 2060. So at the end of the day, China scores 3 out of 10 on the scorecard. Puts them in the number one place because I'll be adding countries. They undoubtedly will fall with time. Unfortunately, China, more than any other country, is why you will not hear me talking about on this channel meeting the Paris goals of 1.5 degrees centigrade. To start with, I don't agree with how that was measured, going from pre-industrial. The question is, how do we go from today? But whether you are dealing with Paris goals or goals from today, as long as China is on the current path at the current level of emissions and not rapidly dropping their numbers, temperature rise is baked in. It's going to happen. You're going to see from today temperatures rising 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees by the end of the century with all the negative impacts that bring. I'll be mixing these videos with technology topics. Please comment below if you like it, subscribe, and in general, give me feedback. Appreciate it. You all have a great day.